Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of Inside Guns with your host, me, the Yankee Marshal. Now, today I want to talk about something that's going to be very controversial. It's going to piss off a lot of people. This is one of the times I'm going to probably piss off more people on the left than I do on the right. And sometimes I piss off more people on the right than I do the left. But like I said, this time it's going to be probably more people on the left than I do people on the right. I'm probably going to get called a racist. It's okay, I've been called a racist before, even though I'm probably one of the least racist people in the gun community. But I'm okay with that. Doesn't stop me from saying what I believe is the truth. And today I want to talk about an issue that I've talked about before, but apparently a lot of people still believe these fallacies. And it's about whether police departments or policing in general is inherently racist. And do we have a problem with a lot of racist cops? Are blacks being treated unfairly? You know, we see all the signs, stop killing us and blah, blah, blah. And, oh, more black people are killed than white people, even though there's less black people, blah, blah, blah. We hear all those statistics and they're true. And people asked me the other day, they're like, you said you don't like the police, but you don't believe they're racism. That they're racist. That doesn't make any sense. Why do you not like the police and blah, blah, blah. And I kind of gave a short explanation of it then. But I do believe there's a big problem with the police in this country. But it's not that they're racist. When you start saying, oh, the problem is that they're a bunch of racists and they target black people, people ignore the real issues. They ignore the real reasons that we should have problems with police as they stand today, as modern policing. People love to scream, oh, they're racist because they're killing black people. It's just not the case. And it's easily disproven that they are not targeting blacks at a higher rate than they target any other ethnic group. It's easily disproven by simple math. When you look at the number of crimes that are committed and who they're committed by, and the people that police have contact with every day, they do not target any ethnic group at any rate that is disproportionate to the number of crimes they commit. That doesn't lend itself to being a racist operation, because if that was true, if they were racist, well, then the number of black people they make contact with, and therefore the number of black people where things go south with, would be higher than the rate they commit the crimes at. And it isn't. So that just kind of shows you right there, just that one figure can show you that it isn't about race. It's about who's committing the crimes. And also, you can look at black officers versus white officers versus Asian officers. A white officer is no more likely per person they have contact with to disproportionately be either brutal or abuse their authority with a person of any color outside of, like I said, the number of times they come in contact with that person and in proportion to the number of crimes those people commit. Whether it's a black officer, white officer, Asian officer, they're basically the same. And I know a lot of people love to yell, well, that officer had 10 events of where he's had complaints for brutality, and out of the 10, 6 of them were black. And they're not even 12, 1.2 of those people should have been black if it was the same amount of the number of people in the population, since black people are only 12% of the population at the time. Well, no, that's not how you look at it. The number of people that should have had complaints against this officer is probably about 60%. Because the number of people he came into contact with committing violent crimes, 60% of them were black. In fact, pretty much of all the people he came into contact with committing crimes, even though blacks only make up 12% of the population, they probably committed 60% of the crimes, according to statistics. So that's the right ratio. The same percentage of blacks he's coming in contact with are reporting an issue. The same percentage of whites he's coming into contact with are reporting an issue, Hispanics, etc. It's all based on the people they come in contact with each day, which is based on the number of crimes committed by different groups of people. And this is going to be a long topic today because this is very complex. This is not something simple. I'm not just going to give you all platitudes or buzzwords to run out with. I want people to really understand this once and for all. The problem I have with police and why it's not anything to do about race, period. So this might be the only topic we cover in today's video, and I'm okay with that. I've been needing to shorten down my videos anyway. but we'll get back to a regular video tomorrow. But this topic is just too important and too complex to spit out in a 5-minute segment. But like I was saying, it's not about race, period. It just isn't. It's all proportionate. The math works out. Now, I'm not denying that the police departments and the policing, what we consider a modern police department now, has its roots in racism, like most things the government uses to control the people does. Back when the slaves were first freed, governments panicked and created all these weird laws to repress people's rights just so that they could make sure black people didn't enjoy the same rights as white people. So it's true it started out that way, but that's not the way it is today. It just doesn't pan out in the math. So when you claim that, it makes it look like you don't know what you're talking about. So even though there is serious problems with police, when you start screaming that the problem is they're all racist, well, when people who have any intelligence look and go, well, that doesn't add up mathematically that they're racist. Sure, there are some racists. There's racists everywhere. There's racist butchers. There's racist dog catchers. There's racist gun tubers on YouTube. But they don't make up a huge percentage of any group. Now, some groups have more racists in it than others. I personally will say, I've been to multiple militia meetings. I've tried to join different militias in my area, which is a fairly progressive area. And I've walked out of about 70% of them thinking, wow, was that a Klan rally or a militia rally? So there are certain groups that tend to attract more racists, but in the law, as far as law enforcement is concerned, I would say it probably does attract some racists, but they have a strict enough code of conduct and rules of engagement, etc., just like the military does, that it doesn't really become a huge factor in the way they do their work. And that's borne out in the numbers. So when we say the problem with cops is they're racist, we ignore the real problems. The real problems isn't that they're racist, it's just that they're abusive. And they are brutal, but it isn't brutality against a specific race. It's because they feel they are above the law. They have been changed from civil servants and peacekeeping officers to a private army that serves the powers that be. The militarization of police is all about that. Instead of peace officers, they want soldiers. And they want soldiers that maintain the peace through strict enforcement of laws and controlling the population. That's what they want. That's what the police departments have been turned into. That's why they've been taught for decades now. It's us against them. If you've ever sat in on a morning briefing for any local police departments, you'd be surprised at what it's like. I have had the disadvantage of, or advantage, I guess I could say, but to me it seems like a disadvantage, of being involved in law enforcement years ago when it was quite a bit different, even though it was still a little racist back then, but everyone was a little racist. But back then, things were different. It wasn't us against them. It was, remember, we're serving the community and we need to keep things in order and we need to do the right thing and blah, blah, blah. Now it's, to watch your back because it's us against them and they'll get you any chance they get and blah, blah, blah. Because I had the disfortune, like I said, of going back through the process again a couple of years ago, thinking about going back into law enforcement and went, no. After the interview processes, I was like, no. Used to be when you were interviewed, they were trying to weed out people that had the wrong mentality. People that were too angry, too aggressive, or there for the wrong reasons, and making sure they knew how to actually serve their community. Now all the questions were geared around, will you do as you're told? Will you not squeal on someone else who doesn't do something you think they should do or does something you think they shouldn't do? That was basically all the questions. It was really shameful. They weren't trying to weed out the wrong kind of people anymore. They were trying to get the right kind of people for what they wanted. And that's a big change in the way things have been done in law enforcement in this country. And that's been only over 30 years. Big changes. In fact, I know a lot of officers that have been in the business for 30 years, and they're like, I would not join today. The people they're letting in today are not officers. They're foot soldiers. And that's what they want. That's why they've militarized the police. They're all about controlling the population. And they are abusive because they abuse your freedoms every day by being an everyday part of your life. Like, you better not do anything. The police are watching. You better not speed. The police are watching. You better not do anything or throw a paper wrapper somewhere. The police are watching you. You're being watched. You're being watched by Big Brother, and we've got this army that will come in if we decide you're a problem. That's not what law enforcement is all about. Law enforcement is supposed to be about preventing crimes and solving crimes. Instead, that's probably 20% of them spend any time doing any of that. They're about enforcing the laws, what they're supposed to be about enforcing the law to better the community, to create a safe environment for the citizens. Instead, what they're doing is enforcing laws to control people, enforcing laws to make money, like traffic revenue, etc. More of them spend their time on traffic duty or rousting out homeless people or things like that than they do ever dealing with crime. Because that's not their main focus anymore. Their main focus is control and revenue. They're all about control and revenue nowadays. That's all they are. They are foot soldiers in case the government needs them, and they are a revenue source up until that moment. And that's just the way it is. I'm sorry. And I know everyone thinks, oh, but the cops I know are good people. Yeah, you say that until you question their authority in some way. It's so funny to watch someone who's a police officer, who's like maybe got a YouTube channel, a big fat sweaty one, who, whenever you challenge them in any way, they get so irate because in their professional life, they're so used to using their gun and their badge to enforce their opinions that when it comes down to actually having to confront a person as if they are not an inferior, they can't handle it. So this whole, the cops I know are good. No, they're not. Because here's the thing. They know what system they're in. They know what the unions do. They know what their fellow officers do. And the very fact that they're still involved in it means they're okay with it. I've had ones come on my channel that are supposed to be such strong pro-Second Amendment advocates who would never do any of the things wrong that cops do. But when you press them on a question, would you enforce this unconstitutional law? Well, yeah, I'm not going to lose my pension. I'm not going to lose my power, my sense of power. That's my sense of self. If someone took my gun and my badge, I wouldn't be a man anymore. That's most of them nowadays. I hate to break it to you. And the government, like I said, has just created that situation by hiring the wrong people and then giving them the wrong attitudes, telling them it's us against them, and also creating this environment where they're not held accountable. They can get away with shit. Nowadays, if you get an officer on tape being grossly negligent at his job, just completely unsuited to be an actual peace officer, and he causes the death of someone through his own negligence and incompetence, it's still about a 1 in 10 chance he'll ever suffer any consequences. If it's not on tape, which would be 90% of it, you got almost zero chance that they'll ever face any consequences. And that's just the way it is. And that's why they're abusive. That's why they overstep their authority, because they know there's no boundaries. Because they know the powers that be don't hold them accountable because they want them there and available when they need them. They're basically a private army. Why do you think they give them military equipment? That's what's wrong with law enforcement. We don't need as many cops as we have now. We have multiple times the number of cops we have now than we did in, say, the 70s and the 80s. Way more. Yet crime rates are lower. And it isn't in direct relation. It wasn't like every time we hired more cops, crime rates went down. No, the big hiring sprees usually occurred after crime trends already started going down. And if you want a perfect example of a police force that's used as a private army, just look at the NYPD. If you don't believe what I'm saying is true, I know people who live in New York who had their cars towed one time because they dared park on the street in front of their apartment building, and a local gallery decided they were having a gala that weekend, a fundraiser, and they went to the police department and said, hey, we want you to clear the streets so we can valet park. No warnings to anyone or anything. They just went and towed all the cars. Everyone who parked on the street that night got their car towed. If they had a problem with it, well, I guess they could file a complaint, but otherwise they have to go pay the fine and get their car. Because the 1% needed that parking space for their valet parking for their event. That kind of thing is common in New York City. They didn't stop crime in New York City by being great police officers. It's not like they went in and solved all the crime and that's why the crime rates are dropping in New York. No, it's because they acted as a private force to drive out anyone that isn't part of the elite in New York City. There's very few people left in New York that don't fit a certain socioeconomic group. And the ones that are left, the ordinary everyday people that are there, this huge police department acts as a buffer between them and anyone they would potentially victimize. And pretty much ignores crime among those groups. Be in Little Italy or something in New York and commit a crime and see how much attention you get by the police. Because you're not harming the 1%ers. So that's what police departments are becoming. That's what they want them to be. And there's a reason for that. It's like people are always getting up in arms about gun control. And I always say to people, stop fear-mongering about the inconsequential and unlikely because it distracts from the real issues. And that's the same thing here when they say they're racist. That's not the real issue. So you're ignoring the real issues. And to be honest, when it comes to gun control, and I know this is a little off the topic here, but when it comes to gun control, politicians would rather not have to ban any guns because they know that riles up the anti-government people, the pro-freedom people, etc. They would much rather teach you to be dependent on the police, which is what they've been preaching for years. Don't take things in your own hands. Call the police. The police are there to protect you, blah, blah, blah. Even though they go to court to make sure that it's shown that it is not their obligation to protect you. But they still want you to believe that because it'd be far easier for them to not have to ban a single gun. It'd be better if people just didn't feel they needed to own a gun because they can count on the police to protect them. And if they can get enough people to count on the police to protect them, as soon as they give Order 66, or so to say, to the police that say, hey, the citizens are out of line here, they're questioning our authority, we got to put them back in their place. Well, now those people that were supposed to protect them are now the force that puts them back in their place at the say-so of the powers that be. And they would much rather have that just happen than they would actually try to forcefully take guns from people because they don't want a confrontation. They want you to be lulled into submission. They want you to surrender your freedom to defend yourself. They want you to surrender your ability to defend yourself because they want you to feel like, I don't need to defend myself because the police are there. They've got more police than ever and crime rates are down and it's because of the police. And so I don't even need a gun. That's what they want you to do. They want you to idolize the police. And I never have understood the right wing idolizing the police. It doesn't make sense. A bunch of people believe in small government and personal responsibility, etc., but then lick the fucking boots of one of the most authoritarian regimes in the country, the fucking law enforcement. They kiss their fucking asses because I guess it somehow makes them feel tactical or something or involved in it. They're just like, I guess, wannabes. But I don't understand it because that's the biggest threat to your freedoms. That private standing army in the United States that they have weaponized and outfitted and everything to be nothing more than crowd control nowadays. That's what they are. They're just crowd control, people control. That's my problem with police. It isn't that they're racist. Now, I know a lot of people are going to get mad at me about saying, oh, the blacks commit more crimes, etc. Also, I'm not saying that in a racist way. I'm saying that in a way that's mathematic. Black people commit more crimes. If, let's just say this. Far more often than a white person attacks a black person attacks a white person. Far more often than either of those, a black or a minority attacks another black or minority. And even that's not racist. It just so happens that if you live in a poor inner city where a lot of the crime happens, the people around you, your potential victims, are probably also the same minority as you because they tend to live in clusters. People, we are tribal. We tend to live in clusters. I love to think we have moved beyond that, but we still do it to an extent. That's why we have, little Chinatown or Little Italy and stuff in cities because people tend to group together. So when those people group together, let's say poor blacks who live in a neighborhood together, well, then their potential victims, the person down the street they might rob, is probably another person, just simply because that's what happens to be there. They're not targeting them because of their skin color. Same thing with police. That's why I don't like BLM. People say, "Oh, you're anti-BLM. That's another sign you're racist." I'm not anti-BLM. I just don't think they cover the real issues because they do the same thing I'm talking about with police and with gun laws, etc. They scream the wrong thing and then they don't ever take care of the real problems. They scream, the police are out to get the black man. No, black man's committing more crimes and therefore he's having more confrontations with police and therefore they are disproportionately suffering from the effects of a hostile authoritarian police force, but it's not because of race. It's cultural issues, social issues, etc. Maybe the black communities aren't getting a good enough education. They don't have the same chance at education. They aren't getting financial opportunities for jobs. They don't have the same financial opportunities other communities do. There's a lot of reasons black people are suffering. There's also a lot of cultural issues that you have to face. You can't just pretend they don't exist. That's like people in the gun community pretending, we don't have racists in the gun community, or, oh, those people that attacked the Capitol are Antifa because white people wouldn't do that. Trump wouldn't do that. That just makes you look ignorant and it avoids the problem. It actually makes the problem worse because when you ignore it, it's allowed to fester. And that's what BLM does. They ignore the factors that are causing black people to be so disenfranchised and denied opportunity that they commit more crimes. If they quit screaming it was racism from the police, well, then they could say, well, what do we do about better education for blacks? What do we do about changing our culture to where we don't idolize pimps and rappers? What do we do to change some of the social problems, the economic problems, the cultural problems that are causing more black people to die at the hands of these horrible police officers? That's when you really deal with the problem, when you stop yelling, something else. You can't be yelling the sky's falling and expect people to worry about, fixing the floorboards that someone's going to trip over. Because if the sky's falling, why bother? So, like I said, this is going to be the only topic today because I've already beat this to death. Yes, I do think there's a serious problem with policing in this country. I think it is the worst threat to our safety in this country, actually. And that's why I don't like it. And I don't understand why people on the right idolize them. Although you see the same people that idolize police. It's funny to see people beating police with Blue Lives Matter flags at the Capitol. They were all pro-police until the police tried to control them, like the police are there to do. And then that suddenly went out the window. So it's mostly fucking lip service. So get over that and quit doing that lip service because you just give them more power to be wrong and be corrupt and be abusive and invasive. So stop doing that. But like I said, racism when it comes to police isn't the problem. There's a lot of other problems. A lot of problems. And I hope I spelled them out for you here. But race isn't it. And as far as the black community goes, I commiserate with all the things the black community faces. And believe me, I wish everybody had equal opportunity in this country. And that would be my goal. A poor black person in an inner city Detroit should have the same opportunity to better themselves and achieve something as an upper middle class white person in Massachusetts. But another thing you got to remember also is you might not have the same opportunity as that upper middle white class white guy in Massachusetts, and therefore we need to make sure you do. But also remember the poor white kid in a trailer park in West Virginia also doesn't have the same opportunities as an upper middle class white person in Massachusetts. So when we say everyone should have equal opportunities, it just doesn't include the minorities. It also includes poor white people. It should be for all people that are disenfranchised, not any particular color group, as far as I'm concerned. So if you want to call me racist, because the biggest problems the gun community has is calling on these issues, making big deals about issues that don't matter and aren't very likely, and worshiping police. And the problems with the police are aplenty, but it isn't racism. And the problem in the black communities and other minority communities isn't really racism either. It's a lot of other issues that we need to take care of. But as long as people keep screaming the sky is falling, we'll never get anything done about anything.